So really what our intent today with this training is to increase the understanding of the person writing the district grant application, how to use the grant module. That's why Lynn and Michael are with us. And that by attending the session or listening to it, viewing it in its entirety as a recording, then the author will have completed one of the club qualification components for your club, as well as qualifying them to write the grant. And Hal will talk more about his expectations that you can share if people are not able to attend live today. So again, our contributors, there's Cindy, Kathy, Hal, Michael, and I'll just kind of be in the background here doing the tech stuff. So I would like to turn it over to DRFCC Cindy. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm so pleased to see so many people from all around the district taking time out of their Saturday in District 5110 to learn all about how to write a grant for your local communities. So today we're going to hear about how to submit a grant, how to qualify your club to receive our precious district dedicated funds that you all contributed to 3 years ago. It's so important. I mean, you think of all our contributors that have given their precious treasure to the annual fund of Rotary International. They expect us to steward the funds and use it wisely in our communities and around the world. And so I'm really grateful that you're here to make sure that we accomplish that goal, that we take care of the funds, we use it for relevant projects in our communities, and we learn how to report back to RI on the great work that we've done. So with that, I want to share with you some of the, and there's only a few changes from last year related to district grant policies for district grants. So next slide, please.
I just sent you a link. I got it finally. Okay. Leanne sent a link on the Wednesday, the 13th. Okay. And I missed it. So
Somebody needs to mute. We met this year right after the last quarterly grants meeting to discuss whether or not the matching for district dedicated funds to your club funds should remain at 1 to 1.5 or go back to 1 to 1. Last year was an experiment. 55 clubs received district dedicated funds at the match of 1 to 1.5. And 3 to 4 other clubs got a second priority grant. This year, our district dedicated funds are decreasing by probably around $5,000 to $6,000. And in the interest of making sure that all clubs can participate if they so choose, we've moved the district DDF match back to 1 to 1.
Ooh.
Somebody doesn't like that. So for instance, if you have submitted a grant with $2,000 from club funds, the match will be $2,000 in DDF. There's 3 types of grants training that we offer in the district. And the first session we completed at Pre-Pets in Seattle this past February. All PEs are required to attend the Introduction to Grants Management. Many of you were there in Seattle and got qualified as presidents-elects. If you were not in Seattle, you can also take the Grants Management Seminar at RI to qualify yourself to receive DDF. And then today we have training for district grants, which qualifies, also helps qualify a club and is required for the author of a district grant. And there's also grant management seminar training also is required for global grants, which I won't go into right now.
I'm sorry, Cindy, did I move this slide too quickly for you?
Yeah, a little bit. That's all right. A couple of dates to remember, and we're going to see these dates throughout the presentation today. Your district grant application submission is due June 1 of this year. It's coming right up. And so I'm glad you're all here to hear about how to apply. Final approval for your district dedicated fund check will be probably by September 1 if you have submitted all the revisions that the grants team requests of you after you submit your grant. Then don't forget that December 1 is the deadline for your final reports for grants you're working on this year, 22-23. Presidents, make sure you have all your signatures on your club MOU and financial management plan submitted, hopefully by July 1. June 1 would be better of this year. Okay, Leanne.
Okay, now we're back over. Thank you.
And next slide. So it is my pleasure today to introduce Rotarian Lynn Kelly. Lynn is, and her husband Jim reside in Ocean Isle Beach, North Carolina. So welcome, Lynn. She is a Paul Harris Society member and a major donor. So she also is appreciative of your presence here today. Take care of those precious DDF funds we receive. Lynn has been with DAC-DB for 6 years. And she has been involved in the creation of the grants module that we're going to hear about today that you're using for district grants. Lynn and her team are also responsible for day-to-day inquiries that are delivered via email, phone, or ticket. You should know that Lynn and her team are always available to set up one-on-one trainings when necessary to help clubs understand DAC-DB. Lynn, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. Also on is Michael Soden, and he is going to be watching the chat in case you have any questions during our demo. So I am going to share my screen as soon as Leanne lets me.
You got it.
Okay, here we go. Let's see here.
While Lynn's pulling up her screen, someone still is not muted. So if you all would take another look and make sure that you're muted, I would appreciate it.
I think that's Ben Klein.
Okay, Ben, you've been called out.
All right. Does everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. When you first log into
Len, we're seeing Zoom. We're not seeing the actual DAC-DB.
Really? Thank you. Let's try this again. How's that?
Now we're in DAC-DB. Yes, very good.
All right, great. Thanks, Michael. When you first log into DAC-DB, you land on your home page, and this could look different to each of you depending what club you're in based on the stories you have. But now when we want to go to the grants, you are going to go to your My Club tab. Now, you're going to go to your grants icon, and I want you to notice I'm in here in the Eugene Metropolitan Club, and I am impersonating today Daniel Reese, but there is no grants icon here. So if you get to this page and you do not see your grants icon, I want you to click this little wheel up on the top right of the page. And then when you, well, that's interesting. Here we go. You're going to drag the grants up to the top, the yellow section here, and then you're going to click on Set My Configuration. And now the grants icon is there. So I'm going to click the grants icon on. And since June 1st is still in this Rotary year, notice it's still says 22-23. You're going to come in and change your org year. So I'm going to click the button. I'm going to change it to next year and click change. You can also set it as your working year. If you're done with everything you've been working in 22-23, you can click this little button here and it'll stay on the current year. And now on the left-hand menu, you're going to click on Club Grants View. When you do click on Club Grants View, you are probably not going to see anything here. I have an approved grant that I created earlier. So when we get to demonstrating the final report, we're going to go to this one. But you will see the big orange button on the top right to create a grant request. So I'm going to click the button. And the first thing it's going to ask you is for your project name. And so you can keep this, you know, rather on the shorter side. So I'm just going to put in and then you're going to put your city and state where the project is going to take place. And the country is the US. And then your complete date, when you expect it to be completed. And then you can pick, we have some areas of focus here that you can select. And then a short description here. Once you've done that, you're going to go to the next tab. Notice there's just 4 tabs up on the top. If you are working the project with another club, this is where you would add the other club, but we're just going to work with one club today. Then you put your contacts, the contacts in the club if somebody else is helping you with the information. And then the 4th tab is the application tab. And this is where you're going to enter your start date. I'm just going to go back to and normally this, and I'm sure Kathy will explain this information later, but usually this is the treasurer of the club. And then maybe your club address. And here is where you can elaborate a little more on the project, because this is what your team is going to look at when they're determining whether this project is going to receive any grant funds. So this can be a longer description of your project. They ask a few questions here. What humanitarian efforts? So read the question carefully and answer accordingly. I'm just going to put some text in here. And how are your Rotarians going to be involved? And how are you going to publicize this? And then there are some items you do have to fill out here. If there is another organization, Kathy has some things in red here. Pay attention where there's red information. I'm just going to put NA here. And then there's a few things that you have to agree to. So you just check yes. And let's see, it looks like there's the member name. I guess you have to put in your person's name in here. I'm just going to put some text and then agree there. Now, once you've done that, then you're going to save your grant. Now that I've saved the grant, you can see that the screen has changed. First, on the top is a status bar. So every time you come into your grant, you're going to know exactly where you are. So if somebody's asked you, have you submitted the grant for signature for your club? if this isn't checked, you'll know that nobody from your club has signed it yet. If you thought that you submitted it for district approval, you can look here at step 3. And if that's filled in, then yes, you have submitted it. If it's not, then you have to come up here and click the button to submit the grant. So now you're finished, you've looked at it, you're sure that you want to submit it. Before you do that, you're going to put your budget in. So I'm going to click on the budget. And now we're going to add the income items. So you are going to request DDF. So I'm going to put DDF request here. And I'm going to say this is $500. And it's the DDF requested. And I'm going to check that.
Lynn, excuse me, this is Leanne. I'm going to interrupt. We have, we've encouraged a lot of people who are interested in becoming their grant writer and learning more about district grants to attend this call. So I would ask all of our presenters, could we, if you're going to use an acronym, would you define what it is, like DDF or MOU?
Oh, district designated funds.
Thank you.
So that is the portion that your district is going to provide to you. And all the other funding is funding you're going to supply on your own. So that's what DDF means. So you're going to put that amount in. Then you're going to go back to the income and put your matching amount in. I'm just going to call this club funds. And make sure when you're putting the funding source, you pick the next radio button that says other club funding. So we have our total there. Now remember, this is the budget. So now I'm going to add our estimated expenses. And this is going to be for the purchase of the books. And my total is going to be $1,000. Because that's what I'm hoping with your the contribution from the district that I'm going to be allowed to spend. So when you look at your budget summary, it amounts to 0. Now you have everything completed. If there aren't any preliminary documents you want to load here, you can. Maybe you have a budget on an Excel spreadsheet that is very detailed that you want to put there. Maybe you have commitments from other partners that you want to include here.
Lynn, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question here as you're filling out it. It's come from Marv Kaplan
Mm-hmm.
out of Redmond. And he says, we've been told to make our budget what our grant is. So our event is $9,000, but grant with match is $4,000. How do they show that?
Okay. So if that were the case, let me just change my club funds here, and I can make this part higher. So my club portion is higher, but the portion you're asking from your district is going to be lower. So if you have a larger budget, but you're only going to be limited to so many dollars from your district, the DDF will be lower, if that's what I'm understanding.
Yes,
If I'm
I
understanding.
believe, yep.
And I don't know if that's the policy for the district.
Lynn, I'll just, if I can pop in, sorry about that. This is Kathy.
Mhm.
And as Marv mentioned, what we have recommended is that folks in our district leave the budget for the purpose of the grant at the club funds and the matching funds, rather than, let's say they have a $5,000 outside grant from whatever, Fred Meyer Foundation or something. Rather than putting that into this proposal, we can ask them to describe it in the grant application box, but so that we'll just be requesting the receipts for the DDF and the club match part of it. So sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. That then sort of simplifies the clubs having to put all those receipts for the total grant, which would be much higher.
Okay, so we're going to take that back and we're going to make it even. And so that's what it's going to be.
Sorry about
All
that.
right, that's good. All right, so as I said, you can put preliminary documents here if you want to attach them. Notice here is the grant application. So the minute you saved it, it saves your grant application as an HTML. And now you are ready to sign the grant and submit it to the district. So there will be a button up on the top here. This says Club Collect Grant Signatures. I'm going to click that button on. A box pops up. Hopefully you can see the pop-up here. It's asking me to confirm that I'm starting the signature process. You're going to say, okay. And now the notice my status bar. Since there's only one signature required, it has been submitted to the district. Oops, submitted for signatures. I apologize, submitted for the signatures. Let me go back to the Club Grants view. And now you can see up here, remember that approved grant I talked about? See how it's going to separate the grants in your Club Grants view? But we're interested in this one. So I'm going to go back in here. So I'm guessing, oh, something changed since yesterday. So it looks like, and I am in here as Daniel. Right now, this should say submitted grant for district approval.
Lynn,
Yes.
this is Hal. We have it set so that only the club president can submit the grant for approval.
Oh, okay, that's why. All right, so who is the president for this club? Let's see. The current club president you're talking about. Hitch, okay.
Be the 23-24.
President. Okay. Oh, because he, I thought that for sure this would be okay though, because he was in here. Let me just look for the grants again. Let me look for the signatures. They're all over here. Save.
That was the wrong arguer.
Oh, thank you. Okay, let me look again now. I thought I had him in here as the Well, I'm thinking because I'm trying to force him to be the president, he's the president-elect, it's not working for him. So I'm just going to be myself for a minute.
You're right, Lynn. Dan Reese is a past president. I think it's Brian Reed who as.
Oh, I have the wrong person. Thank you.
Yeah. So Brian is.
All righty.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me just go in here. I'm just going to submit it so that we can move on here. Club Grants view. Okay, change year. All righty. Okay, here we go. Now we go. All right, so we started the grant signature process. Now you're going to see the button that says Sign Grant Application. You'll click that button, and then the button will now say Submit Grant for District Approval. When I click that button, now you're going to see two additional tabs. One is an activity log, so you can tell who did what when. And when the emails are turned on, you will see the emails and everybody the emails went to. And then here's the signature log. So you will see the person who signed it, the person who started the club process, the person who submitted it to the district for approval. Now I'm going to be the correct person in here, hopefully. And you told me Reed, Brian Reed, right? Is the president?
Right, president, yes, president-elect, and will be president in 23-24.
Okay.
I didn't expect any publicity today. This is exciting.
Okay, so now that I'm Brian, I'm going to pull my grants up here again. So you get a little tutorial, a second tutorial here, how to add those little icons, set my configuration. I'm going to go back here now and change my year. And if you click this, as I said, it'll keep that working year there for you. And now Club Grants View. And notice here it is waiting for district approval. So now your grants are finished, you've completed everything, and now you're ready to submit your final report and submit your expenses and receipts. So I'm going to, here's the approved grant that we have. So we're going to go to that grant, and note your grant has to be approved before you're going to see the final report. So I'm going to click this on, and notice now you see this expenses tab, and you also see the final report tab. So first I'm going to submit the expenses because that is what they're going to be looking for from the district. And first I'm going to add a receipt. And this is going to be for the group that is, we're in a different grant now. So we made duffel bags that were personalized for the Rotary Cottage at the Boys and Girls Home. So I'm going to put the name of the vendor here. And the invoice number. And let's see my amount. I think it was, I'm just going to put 1,000. I think it's 1,080. And now I'm going to add my receipt. Now, after you add your receipt, there's one more step. You're going to click the pencil and you're going to add a copy of that receipt. By doing that here saves you some time because now you do not have to go back to the Documents tab to add your copies of your receipt. So I'm going to click Choose the File. I'm going to go my grants. Let's see if I can find my invoice. Here's my invoice. And I'm going to save it. So now here's my information. You can see I've saved my document because now this is a hyperlink to open it. So that's 2 steps. First, you add the receipt, and after the receipt is saved, you click the pencil and actually upload the document. Now, I am going to add my expense payment, which is a copy of the check that I used to pay for that. So I'm going to click Add Payment. And again, I'm going to put the same vendor. And then my check number. And I'm going to put my cursor in here to find the invoice that I posted. So this makes it easy for your district team to match your expenses with your receipts. So as soon as you start putting the receipts in, you're going to see them pop up here when you're in the expense portion. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to click Add. And now I am going to go back to the pencil. And now I'm going to upload, choose my file, upload my check. And now I'm going to click Save. And now here you can see that my check is there. My check number is here. My invoice number is here. My vendor who I paid my check to, everything looks good. Obviously, many of you are going to have more receipts and more checks, and maybe it's going to be a copy of a bank statement where you submitted your check through a bank statement, whatever you have to submit here. But it's important, put your receipts here. When I go to my documents now, you're going to see your expenses, and you will see the different expenses and receipts that you've put here. So you do not have to add them again, because your district team is going to come to this expense tab to look at everything. So now you're ready to complete your final report. And there's a few things that are automatically populated. So anywhere you see text appearing, you don't have to put anything in there. So what did our team do? We packed the duffel bags and we put in personal items for the residents of the Rotary Cottage. And then if you did have people that assisted you, you can put the information in to what they did. You don't have to touch any of this because this will pull automated information in. And note that whatever's in red, read that. So these are additional instructions your district has added. And now what you're going to do is click Save the Final Report. It's going to tell you that a copy has been saved. You're going to say, okay. I always like to go back to my final report to make sure all my little numbers are there. And then I also like to go to the documents and make sure my final report was saved. And the final report saves as a PDF. So if you haven't submitted the final report to the district yet, and you do have to make changes to it before you start the signature process, you can go ahead and change the final report, save it again, and then it'll move that first final report into the backup section right here, and it'll put the most recent final report under your documents. But now I am ready to collect my final signatures and submit our final report to the district. So I'm going to click the button. It says to please confirm that I filled out the final report, and we've added all the images, etc. I'm going to say okay. Now the club's going to sign the final report. Here are the signatures from when the grant was first submitted for approval. So I'm going to click sign. And now it's asking you, did you complete the final report? Did you add all your documents and complete and upload it? Has your budget been updated with actuals? If you're ready to submit to the district, you'll click this on. If you weren't ready to submit it, you would just ask that it go back to the report, do what you needed to do on it, and then you can submit it. Now you can see on the status bar, we're up to line 6 here. We've submitted it for the district. Now you're ready for the district to review it and approve it. So let's stop there and let's open it up for any questions we might have.
And do you want me to read them, or do you want just
Sure.
to open it up?
Why don't we start
Okay.
with those?
Okay, so the first one we have is when you have receipts, and this is from Suzanne Johansson. When we have receipts for all of your doing, how do you submit a receipt for a small amount? This is an ongoing issue for all of our Gift of Literacy grant. We buy books in bulk and the numbers don't ever magically equal the amount on the DDF.
Well, I'm going to let Kathy answer that to see how she'd like that submitted.
Hey, excuse me. Thank you. I am quickly scrolling back to that question. Michael, so the question was when the receipts don't exactly match
Right.
the payments. So, and sorry, who was the person who submitted that?
I hopefully pronounced it right. Suzanne Johansson.
Suzanne, thanks, Suzanne. Okay. So yeah, this is a good question. A lot of you do purchase smaller ticket items and have a lot of receipts to upload. So to Suzanne and to the others who have this question, it is, if let's say you have 5 receipts for a book purchase or something like that, and those 5 receipts add up to $100. It's okay to copy those receipts into one PDF, one file, and we really appreciate them all to be facing the same direction and all that, so that it's easy for us to go through and say, okay, I see 5 receipts, $20 each, the total is 100. And then when I go down to the payment section, I find your check or your Visa payment or however you paid for it, that matches the sum total of those 5 receipts. If I ask, or if I'm addressing your question correctly, that is okay to do that. The big thing that we ask is that you really, kind of like Lynn said, go back and look after you make your copy of your receipts. Go back and take a look at it and make sure you can read it. And we really need the receipts to be uploaded as PDF files. So if you use your phone to take a photo of it, they come up as JPEGs, and then we have a really hard time reading the tiny, tiny fine print. So that would be my comment. That's probably a JPEG file right there, and it comes out pretty much so small that we really can't read it.
Well, I'm wondering, this is Cindy. I don't think we've really answered Suzanne's question. Suzanne, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. The question is so the district has asked us to only submit receipts for the amount that equals the grant, but when the project itself is much bigger, as in our Gift of Literacy program, where we're spending a lot more than just the amount of the district grant, we don't have receipts that exactly match the amount of the district grant.
Okay.
So you're saying that we should only write our grants for the amount of the DDF that we're requesting, but when the project itself is so much bigger, the receipts, I don't know how to get the receipts to match what you want, because you said you don't want the rest of the information, but.
Sure. No, I understand your question now. And so, in that case, as long as you've explained in your project, in the application section, the more expanded version, if you've explained that you've got an additional X $1,000 or whatever from some other organization, thank you, Lynn. Yeah, in your project definition, you can send us a message or remind us or whatever that, okay, my last receipt ends up being $500 more or whatever it is than the total of the grant. But so we can absolutely, as long as you clarify for us, that's what we're doing. This is a much bigger grant. Therefore, I've got these additional receipts so that you have your total. Let's say your total grant for the district is 2,000 from the club and 2,000 DDF matching funds. So that you end up with 4,500 in receipts because, as you said, you had a larger book purchase or whatever it was. That's okay. Just shoot us a quick note or make sure, help us, remind us, or we can go back and look at that. So sorry, I mean, that is going to be okay, with the understanding that additional leftover amount is going to be covered by outside grant funding or other club funding or whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Alrighty then, we have from Forest Hill, we partnered with another 501c3 and they cannot give us an invoice. They provided 100% of the materials for the project. And we're the only other party for the project. Our club did not spend any money outside of our partner organization. This became a problem because the items we partnered with them on had a standard estimated cost, but no real invoice. How does the district handle that situation?
Hal, I'm wondering if you want to take that one.
I don't, I mean, why would a partnering organization not have an invoice? I mean, the terms and conditions of Rotary grants require that partnering organizations keep the same records that the clubs keep. So the partnering organization should have invoices and paid checks for those invoices. So I don't understand why a partnering organization would not have an invoice.
Perhaps let's get clarification from the person who asked the question.
Yeah, either that,
Yeah.
Cindy, or
Am
the
I
other
here?
thing we can do, if they want to contact me offline, we can talk it offline so we don't spend too much time on that one.
Am I unmuted here?
Yes, you are.
Okay. The organization was Sleep in Heavenly Peace. They buy a lot of materials at wholesale or below, and then they build the beds, and we wanted to partner with them to build so many beds in our area. So I guess it sounds like what you're saying is we have to get an invoice from Sleep in Heavenly Peace in order to justify the expense of the bed build. Is that what I'm hearing? Like they went to Cumberland Lumber or
Yes.
Copeland Lumber.
Yes.
Okay. That answers the question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, yeah. Have them just send you the receipt that they, for the money that they spent.
Very good.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So Bruce M., I think we've kind of already answered this, but is it true that we should only spend the funds prior to approval? Okay, let's start this one again. Is it true that we shouldn't spend any money prior to approval, even club funds?
That is correct. So any district grant, so the grant approval process is a two-step process. And the first step is actually the Rotary Foundation approving the block of all of the proposals that we have. And that often takes, at least a month, sometimes more, depending on how quickly we get it in. They have to approve the first step, and then the district, that would be Hal and me and whatever other team members are working on these, have to approve it at the district level. So that is absolutely correct. You shouldn't be making any expenditures related to the grant until you've gotten the grant approved. And that's when it actually moves in DACDB into the grant approval column, and you get a message saying your grant is approved, go ahead and start spending.
Okay. Quick question here. Is it possible to have a defined pop-up specifically, and Lynn, this is probably more for us, a defined pop-up specifically for District 5110 detailing district rules for district grants? I pretty much responded that typically the way I do it in my district is we put it under the grant overview. And that's usually where it goes. I'm not so certain.
And I have it on the screen right now.
Yep. So this is where I would put the rules in.
Yep. And they already have the rules in here for 23-24, it looks like.
Yep.
And hyperlinks.
Yep.
2 items you're going to need.
Thank you, Hal Kibbe.
Yeah. Okay, another one from Mark Kaplan. It looks like Leanne may have already responded to it, but can you use the grants checking account showing a debit for the expense? If we copy the statement and submit it with that, with all the debits for the grants, is that okay? Since no checks were cut, or that no visual.
They're
checks were cut.
electronic.
No electronic checks. And Leanne came back and said on your recording there will be. Oh, sorry.
That's something else.
Yes, sorry. So I'm assuming that would be okay. That's up to the committee, but I would think that would be fine.
Yeah, and I'll chime in again too. This is Kathy. That would be fine. And what, again, to Marv and others who are in this, have this same question. If your bank statement, sometimes the bank statement doesn't specify what the expense exactly is or who the recipient is, although typically the recipient is there. But anyway, just make sure the bank statement is clear. And if it isn't clear, you can let us know. Separately, send us a message and say, you know, whatever debit number XYZ on, you know, August 31st covered this particular expense for that number of dollars. So that's totally okay. The other thing I want to add in this is that it is a legitimate grant expense to get checks for your club district grants bank account. So absolutely, the question is, yes, you can use your debit card, or you can also order checks on your district grants bank account so that you have them if you need them. And you can include that as a grant expense.
Okay, thank you. Keith Nelson, our 22-23 grant funds will not be expended until September 23 college scholarships. Our due date for 23-24 DDF grant is June 1st. Is there a problem with not having 22-23 grant complete before we submit for 23-24 grant application?
Okay, Keith, thanks for that question. You can submit, and actually, Keith, you're not alone. There are several clubs that have scholarship programs for which the funds are not dispersed until August or September, you know, of the following year. So you can absolutely submit your new proposal. Well, you should submit your new proposal by the June 1 deadline. But the new proposal won't be approved until your previous year's grant is closed out. So it will sit there. We will review it. We'll be all ready to go. We'll ask you questions. And then we'll let you know, great, this is ready to go as soon as your final report is in for the previous year's scholarship grant. We'll approve this and disperse the new funds for this new grant.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, Paula Hancock, is an MOU required for the entity that is helping to pay the total invoice?
Paula, maybe you could, I'm not sure I understand the question, or if Hal understands it, he can chime in, or maybe just kind of clarify the entity. I'm not sure what you mean by the entity that's helping to pay the total invoice.
We were just discussing where you had an entity that it was like a bigger grant than what we were applying for. We got approval, you know, for our piece and the district matching. But then if we had another entity that was just helping fund it, you know, like you were describing, where you said, okay, there's a total invoice and it's larger than what we had approved, and we had to use that as our documentation. Is an MOU required for that entity that is paying that total invoice or part of that, the funding?
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Hal, I think I'm going to toss that one into your court. I
don't, as long as you have, as long as that entity is not covering part of the $4,000 or $5,000 in this year's grant, as long as it's not covering part of that $5,000, no, you don't need a cooperating organization MOU. However, if that cooperating organization MOU, if that cooperating organization is, say the grant is $5,000 and you've paid $2,000 of it, and that the other entity is paying $3,000 of it, then yes, you do need a cooperating organization MOU.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's a very fine point on it. I've got it now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay. So we have one, looks like one last question here, which is just a verification on what Marv asked earlier. It says to make sure your debit card is only for the grant account.
That's right. That way you would get the bank statement that is just from your grant account, and you'd be able to upload that bank statement, and it wouldn't have other club operating expense debits on the grant account. So that is right.
Okay, so those are our questions.
And I have one last one that was sent directly to me that I'll put out for the group. It says, can signatures be, actual signatures that are scanned and uploaded? Many of the Rotarians, or certainly the person who has to sign it, this year's incoming president, does not have computer. So have we a solution how to address that?
Sure, Leanne, and to the person asking that question, that does happen. And especially on multi-club grants, sometimes folks need help getting all the president's signatures on there. And the grant committee members, and at this point, I'd say Hal and I can help you. I have frequently done that. Whoever the main person is who's drafting the proposal, if you'll just contact Hal or me, we can help you get those president's signatures on there, even if they're not, if they don't have a computer or they're not really into this kind of technology. Essentially, we'll work on the side with them, getting their approval through an email or a phone call, and then we can go ahead and add their signature in there for you. Because we do ultimately want it in the electronic proposal, but we can absolutely work with you to make that happen.
Okay, just a couple more that just they keep flying in here. Again, another follow-up with Marv is he's asking if an organization is not paying anything, just helping with distribution, is an MOU needed?
Hal, I think I'll leave that one to you too.
I would say yes, because they're helping with the project. I mean, if cooperating organizations are helping us complete the project, then they are helping with the project. It can be pretty simple MOU, but I would say yes, if they're helping with the project, then yes, you need a cooperating organization MOU in most cases.
Okay, again, another follow-up from Marv. I'm not sure I understand this question. As our club has a president's computer, so assume it's a president personal computer, that always goes with the new president. Same for the treasurer. Not quite certain I understand the question.
If I may, Leanne, we have a president's computer that the club has bought only to be used by the president. So when the president leaves, he gives it to the president-elect.
Okay, I think maybe I understand the question, and that doesn't matter, the computer itself, it's the login. And that question does arise. We want the new president. So let's say in my own club, our current president is Steve Hitch, but our new president is Brian Reed, and Brian's the one. So essentially the person needs to log into DACDB, so their name is what shows up. Doesn't matter what device they're using.
Correct. So here's a acronym issue, or what we like to say Rotary alphabet. What is an MOU?
An MOU is a memorandum of understanding. And Lynn still has, on the screen, you'll see the landing page for 23-24 grants. And Lynn is showing down there the links to the Club Memorandum of Understanding and the Cooperating Organization Memorandum of Understanding. And the one, just to clarify, the one that needs to be in your grant proposal is when you have a cooperating organization, right? So you're partnering with, let's say, St. Vincent de Paul in Eugene or something. And so I would want to have the contact at St. Vincent de Paul sign the cooperating organization MOU, and that's what I would upload into the grant. So yeah, MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, and apologies for all the acronyms.
Okay, thank you. And I hope this is the one last question, although they keep kind of popping in here. Eric, you had a comment that you said you want to talk about the final report.
Yeah, I just wanted to express that there's a lot of different ways funding goes on, payments are made, money changes hands, et cetera, and you can't come up with all of those in a session like this. But when you're putting together your information for the final report, you need to tell the story of where the funding came from, where it went, what was done with it, who did what, so that anybody can pick that information up and understand what happened with the money. It's all about that. So if you can give it to your next door neighbor and say, can you read this and understand how we spent our money and what we got for it, then that would meet the test. And so anytime things don't match quite right or whatever, explain that. It's just a matter of taking a little bit of extra time and telling the story so that it makes sense to the reviewers. Because the reviewers, they have no insight other than what you put on that report. So that would be my comment.
No,
Well said, Eric.
Very good point. I even have my grants chair refuses to accept the final report if it's not in the past tense. So in other words, we ought to populate over the stuff, but she requires them to go in and make sure we did this, not we're going to do this.
Mhm.
So yes.
Good point there as well.
And thanks, Eric, for that helpful insight.
Well, Lynn and Michael, thank you very much. I think we'll draw this section of the morning's program to a close. Thank you for all the interaction and the
Welcome.
great questions to everybody. We really appreciated it. There's a couple left in the chat box I think we'll come back to because they address more policy and procedural things than specifically the DAC-DB module. So we'll be sure and pick those up. But again, Lynn and Michael, thank you guys so much and go have a great rest of your weekend. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Lynn and Michael. Much appreciated.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again here and we'll pick up the next part of the program. Covered our questions. I would like to introduce Hal Kivy, your stewardship chair. You've heard him pop in a couple of times this morning already. Thank you, Hal. And let's see here.
Go back one, please.
Sure, just a second. I want to try and pull you up here. Can you start your video?
It's on.
There you are. For some reason, you don't show up where I can highlight you. I haven't quite figured that out. There you go. Okay, now you're set.
Yeah, can we go back? Yeah,
Yep,
perfect.
there
Good.
we go.
Thank you, Leanne. I'm not going to read through all this slide because I think a lot of it is pretty self-evident. I do want to get to point number 2, though, because that may create a problem for some clubs this year. I know Cindy mentioned it, but the club president needed to have attended PETS to have the preliminary or basic training and grants. If the club president did not attend PETS, then they need to complete the grant management seminar course online on the RI website in the Learning Center. It's a fairly extensive course and it's pretty time consuming. So if you have problems with that, if the club president has problems with that, please have them contact me and I'll help them get to the right place on our website. We're asking the 23-24 treasurer to initial page 2 of the club memorandum of understanding. And we're also asking for the 23-24 and the 24-25 president to sign and return the club MOU to me. If you do not have a 24-25 club president yet, then we can accept your club secretary's signature in the place of that. And I would like to emphasize on the club memorandum of understanding, the club MOU, please do not attach it to the district grant application, because if you put it there, I don't know that it's there. And so you're not going to get credit for having completed that MOU. Leanne, next one. Here's a list of the club presidents that I do not have a record of having attended PETS. So if you're in one of these clubs and you're planning on doing a district grant, you need to get a hold of your club president and make sure that they do the grant management seminar. If one of these club presidents did attend PETS, please let me know and I'll check that with DGE Jim to be sure that we have the records correct. But this is the list of where I don't have a record of the club president having attended pets. If your club is not on this list, then you're good to go as far as the club president is concerned. Next slide. The club, Leanne last year Leanne and Tim did a great job of modifying the club memorandum of understanding. Rotary Foundation puts out a basic club MOU, but Leanne modified it somewhat and then got permission from TRF for us to use her modified MOU. In places, you'll see a reference to a financial management plan. That has been incorporated into our club MOU, so there's not a separate club financial management plan that you need to sign. I think the rest of this is pretty self-evident. The bank account, the club MOU probably still says that there are 2 signatures are required. Don't worry about that. That's something that comes from the Rotary Foundation. And again, we can accept just one. And I think unless somebody has questions on something else on this slide, I think the rest of it is probably pretty self-evident. The separate bank account should probably, or would be best if it's labeled simply Rotary Club of XXX District Grants Account. Next slide. We haven't had any problem with a conflict of interest this year that I'm aware of yet, but please just double check and make sure there is no conflict of interest. In the past, we've had a club member submit a grant application, then be the chair or be the CEO of the cooperating organization that received the money, and then manage the money on behalf of the cooperating organization, and then write the final report. And they were the only Rotarian that was involved, and that was a clear conflict of interest. So just be sure that there is no conflict of interest. If there's a potential for a conflict of interest, contact one of us and we'll work with you to make sure that we can have a workaround for it. Next one. Here's a list of resources. I think they're all on that grants landing page that Lynn was showing. The new District Rotary Foundation Manual of Policies and Procedures was just uploaded yesterday. But all the rest of the stuff that you need is on that landing page. If any of those links don't work, and I've noticed sometimes for some reason they seem to break, let me know and I'll get them relinked. Next slide. The landing page for DACDB, Lynn showed you how to get there. Log into DACDB, click on either My Club or the district, the grants icon, and be sure to change the org year to 23-24. If you just go in, most of them are still defaulted to 22-23. So be sure that you change the org year to 23-24. And if any of you have questions on club qualification, please contact me. Okay.
Hey, Hal.
Yep.
You had a Vesna here. You had a question in the chat whether you have to have a separate account for every single grant. I think one grant account was
Yes.
enough, correct?
Yeah, you can have one district grants account, and then you can use that same account year after year after years. But if you, one of the problems that we've seen is that some clubs have labeled that separate account as Rotary Club of XXX, and then put the project name after it. It might be books for schools or books for kids. Well,
Oh, I see. Okay.
that one doesn't work because it should be labeled district grants. I mean, it should be Rotary Club of XXX district grants account, and then use that one over and over and over. But if you change the project,
Got it.
it doesn't make sense. So yeah, just label that account as general as you can.
Thank you.
I think the question, this is Cindy, was more if you have 2 grants going, district grants going at the same time, can you use just one district grants account?
Yes. Yes, you only need one district grants account to keep all of your money. And by the way, express grants that the district gives out are not district grants. So that the express grant money should not go into this account. I guess I should say they're not foundation grants.
Okay, Hal, we don't have any more questions.
Oh, no, there's something in the chat box from Nelson that says, do we need a separate grants account for global grants? Definitely. You need not only do you need a separate grants account for global grants, you have to have a separate grants account for each global grant. District grants, you can combine all of them into one account. For global grants, the bank account has to be separate for each global grant. That's a TRF requirement.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Really important.
Yeah, really important.
Really
Thanks, Nelson.
important.
Thanks, Nelson.
Yeah. Any other question? Let's see. Oh, had you mentioned Express Grant, Hal? Do you want to explain what that is and how it's different?
Well, express grants are funded just by our district. I don't even know who in the district monitors that. In the past, they've been small $500 grants that are sent to the clubs for smaller projects, et cetera. But they are not foundation grants. And so the only money that we really want in the district grants account is the foundation money, not the express grant money.
The name of the Express Grant is being changed to Action Awards, so that confusion should go away.
Ah, superb. Well done, Jim. There's some stuff coming in the chat box.
Right.
Grace, send me an email and I'll help you get the grant icon up for you. Either that or I'll just go in and what club, if you'll let me know what in the chat box, let me know what club you're in and I'll get it fixed for you.
So a question from Bruce, Hal,
Yes.
it says, for clubs that have their own foundations, does it matter to the district whether the club or whether the foundation writes the grant application?
The TRF rules say that we can only send money to Rotary clubs because a foundation is a separate organization. And so by TRF policy, we can only cut checks to clubs. So yes, the club should write the grant application and should manage the funds. Now, the club can accept money from their own foundation as part of their matching funds. But run everything through run everything through the club.
Great, Hal, thank you. Any other final questions for Hal before we move on? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring up Kathy then. Thank you, Hal.
Great, thanks for all those excellent questions. What I am going to do now is do a little bit of a review of the things that Lynn talked about. And I also want to add that Leanne mentioned this at the very beginning, but if you didn't start right at the very beginning, you might not have heard it, that after Leanne has a chance to make a few edits to this presentation, it will be uploaded into the landing page for 23-24 grants. So you will absolutely be able to go back and watch it again. I'm not sure if we've put the slides up in the past, but know that we totally understand this is a lot of detail. So by all means, you'll be able to go back soon and watch the video again if you would like to. And then, of course, you can always shoot us questions and we will get back to you and help you with whatever question you might have. So thanks, Leanne. So as you've seen and heard this now a couple different times, but just a quick review, June 1 of 2023 is the application deadline for this coming Rotary Years grants, 23-24. And we also need to have the clubs qualified, which is what Hal has gone through, before your grants can be reviewed and approved. So be sure to pay attention to to the club qualification requirements so that you'll be ready to go with your grants by the June 1 deadline. Then between June and September 1st, the district committee members will be reviewing and approving and subsequently funding all of these grant proposals for 23-24. Keeping in mind that we do have to have the Rotary Foundation approval and the district committee approval before you can actually start spending any funds for your grant. And a complete application includes not only the narrative text in all of the tabs that Lynn walked through, but also if you have a cooperating organization, we need that memorandum of understanding signed by the representative of the cooperating organization and the representative of your club. And we also need to have your a bank statement from your district grant bank account. Most clubs have those accounts now. If you don't, we want to be sure that you open that account so that all of the district grant funds can be then moved into that account and all of the payments made for your grant project out of that account. Final reports for the current year grants, 22-23, those are due by December 1st of this year. And keep in mind, we encourage you to write those reports as you complete your projects because no new grant funds will be dispersed for your new projects for 23-24 until your final report is complete and closed out from 22-23. Finally, after September 1, we won't be approving any grant. Well, I should say, yeah, incomplete applications need to be wrapped up by September 1, or you risk not being able to get any grant funding in the coming year. Keeping in mind that your application can be complete, but if, as one of the questions came in, we can have everything ready to go for the new grant, even though your final report, let's say you do have a scholarship grant in the current year and you're not awarding that money until August, that can be the final remaining thing, is the approval of your previous year's district grant. Okay, December 1, 2024. So the deadline for your final reports is now December 1 of each year. Hal has been working diligently to get a pretty good estimate of our district designated funds for the upcoming Rotary year. We are estimating now that it'll be around 127,500. I know Hal will keep us updated. He feels like this is a fairly conservative estimate, so we're hoping that it will be at least that much, and maybe if we're fortunate, it could be a little bit higher.
Kathy, that's the amount for district grants. There's also money available for global grants above that.
Right, thank you. Okay, and again, just by way of a reminder, all of the key documents, key dates and deadlines are listed on the district grants landing page. So you do need to make sure, a lot of us have defaults set for in the grants module to pull up when we log in the current grant year, which is likely 22-23. You'll need to actually go in and change your settings when you want it to default to 23-24. But you can always manually change which year's grants you're looking at in DACDB. Anyway, on the landing page, all the required documents that you're going to need to make this happen are there. And as soon as Leanne has a chance to do the edits, the videos of today's presentation will also be accessible there. Lynn mentioned this when she was going through number 2 here, when she was going through the tabs. The details tab, there's a question for you to enter your project description. This is where you do just a couple of lines, very brief description, just an overview of your project. And then in the application tab, you have space to give us much more detail, share the details of your project. This is also where you would want to add, let's say you have a separate grant from another foundation, you can tell us about that in this application tab under the project definition. We also want to know what kind of Rotarian involvement there will be in your project. So be sure and tell us how your members will be involved. When we say no pass-through grants, that's when you, that would be an example of that would be your club just giving money to another organization to do their own project. Those are not allowed for district grants. And therefore, that's why we're asking, how will Rotarians be involved in your grant project? Next slide. Thank you. Okay, the budget tab. In the budget tab, you're going to have both the income side and the expense side. So Lynn went through that and noted where you list your club fund contribution, let's say $2,000 to this next year's project, and then you're requesting a $2,000 district designated funds match. On the income side, and then on the expense side, you just, and this can be very brief, you know, you can say, you know, books, if we're purchasing books for a literacy project, you can note that the expenses will be of the total amount, 4,000, so that you're at the bottom of that budget tab, you're going to see, you want a zero balance so that your income and your expenses cancel each other out and you end up spending all the money that you have. So that's the budget tab. The expenses tab is what you use for your final report. And that's where we need you to upload your project receipts and your project payments. And the same thing will happen. The receipts and the payments should theoretically match and cancel each other out so that in the end you have a zero balance again on your expenses tab. Again, that's just for your final report. The documents tab is where you will upload any additional things like publicity. If you get a mention in your local newspaper, if your town has a local newspaper anymore, or if you're in the newsletter of the organization that is benefiting from your project, be sure and upload those things. Also include your photos of the project. That's what we appreciate, having access to all of that in your documents tab. Okay, what constitutes a valid receipt? So this question, you know, often comes up, and so there are lots of different kinds of receipts or invoices that can be uploaded. Obviously, a standard cash register receipt where you go to the register and you pay the balance that has been rung up, that is acceptable. A zero balance invoice is an invoice that you would have received from the company that's providing, let's say, lumber to build benches in your community park. We would like to see that be a paid invoice. So again, you have a zero balance at the bottom of that. For anybody doing international projects, we, if the country in which your project is taking place, if the language is other than English, we'd like to have an English translation of the receipts. And also we need to know what the exchange rate is, and so that we can calculate, if you're doing a project in Mexico, how many pesos to the dollar, so we understand the value in US dollars of whatever your expenses are abroad. As Hal mentioned in response to one of the questions earlier, if you're working with a cooperating organization, for example, in that Mexico, you have a partner in Mexico who's doing the purchasing and the payments for you, then those cooperating organizations must provide the receipts and evidence of the payments as well. And also, as the question came up, all receipts need to be dated after your grant has been approved. So we definitely need to have you wait until your grant is officially approved by both the Rotary Foundation and the district, and you'll be notified when that happens, and then you can start spending. Just one additional note, I mentioned this earlier, when you're scanning your receipts, if you could sort of line them up and make sure they're all facing the same direction, it'll be a lot easier for anybody else reading the proposal to review your receipts. And the question does arise about whether we can use gift cards. And the answer to that is no. And the reason is because gift cards often don't specify what can be purchased. And so, for example, if you give a gift card to a grocery store, people can purchase things like cigarettes and beer and wine and other things that wouldn't be allowed in the grants. And so that's the reason for not allowing gift cards. As the slide mentions here, there are rare circumstances where an organization only sells lumber or tools or something like that, but you'll need to request approval for a gift card if you think that the entity that you're working with only supplies acceptable items for the use in your grant. So check with us if you have a question about gift cards and we can respond directly to your question. Next slide. Again, in that expenses tab, you want to be sure that in the receipts section, you're uploading your receipts. As Lynn said, a lot of folks, you're all doing actually a great job of entering the line items that specify where the purchase was made and how much it was for. The second step is where folks sometimes run into trouble. We need you to do that second step and actually upload the receipt into the receipt section, because that makes it, again, much easier. We don't have to dig around in all the files in your grant to try and find those receipts. So be sure and upload them right into the expenses tab. And the same is true of payments. In the bottom section, you'll again outline what the payments are for and what the amount is. And then you will either have checks to upload, canceled checks to upload, or bank statements, or both. And for your payment documentation, if your bank provides both the front and back of your canceled checks, you are good to go. We want to see both the front and back confirming that the check has cleared. If your bank only provides the front of the check, then we would ask you to supply the bank statement that also shows that the checks have cleared. Again, this is kind of a reminder, but for your international projects, we would like to have the documentation of the transfer of funds. Usually that would be a wire transfer showing that you sent your project funds to your cooperating partner, let's say, for example, in Mexico, and then you've got the receipts and payment information from your partner documenting the expenditure of the funds. So again, if you've got questions, and we often, very frequently, are working closely with clubs when they're working on their final reports, but don't hesitate to reach out to us and we'll help you work through any questions you have when you get around to your final reports. Great, couple reminders. Be sure and save your proposal frequently as you're working. And I know, folks, this becomes a pretty big frustration if you move from one tab to the next and you forget to save, or if you have to leave unexpectedly and you didn't save and you come back and your work isn't there. So I always just try to make it a habit of clicking the save button every once in a while in the upper right hand corner on your screen to make sure you don't lose any of the work that the time and effort that you've put in to enter all the documentation. Just one other reminder that the proposal signature, the only person signing, so someone else, anybody in the club can draft the proposal, but it's your club president-elect, and that is the person who will be president in 23-24. That's the one who has to sign and submit the proposal by the June 1 deadline. This year, as Cindy mentioned at the outset, the maximum match from the district will be $2,000, and that means your club would have to put in at least $2,000, and then you would request up to $2,000 in matching funds from the district to match your club cash. Multi-club proposals have to be listed as the high priority proposal for all participating clubs, and only the lead club has to be qualified, but we are going to have each of the clubs president-elect sign the proposal. And that's where, again, if you have trouble, if your president-elect isn't a techie and doesn't know how to get in there and do that, contact us, we'll help you do it. Definitely sometimes that can be confusing, so give us a holler, and our contact information will be at the end of this presentation, so it'll be in there. If your club is submitting 2 district grant proposals, one has to be listed as your high priority proposal, and the second one one should be a medium priority, because we don't always have enough funds in the district dedicated district designated funds to fund all the proposals that come in. So we need to know, if we can't fund everything, which one is your top priority. Also, the question, yeah, I guess I sort of answered that. Will both grants be funded? If we have enough funds, as we mentioned earlier, we are estimating we'll have 127,500 in 23-24. It all depends on how many proposals come in and the requests. And so sometimes we cannot fund all medium priority grants, but again, it just depends on how many proposals we have and what the total requests are. Just a quick reminder, most clubs now have your district grants bank accounts set up, but if your club doesn't have one, we're asking that you please set it up now. I don't think there's anybody off the cuff who doesn't have the district grants bank account set up yet. You'll need a bank statement from that account included with your proposal for 23-24. And then of course, we want you to use the district grants bank account to, you would put all the grant money into that account. That means your 2,000 club cash goes in there, your 2,000 district designated funds goes in there, to show that I'm making an example of a $4,000 grant, and then all of your expenses for the grant project would go out of that account. And the reason for that is the Rotary Foundation tells, the Rotary Foundation policy is that we can't commingle our club operating funds with our grant funds. So that's the logic and the reasoning behind it. Yeah, that's it on that one. And again, this has come up a couple times, but please do definitely wait until your grant is approved before you start spending any of your grant project funds. And that's that two-step approval process. We first have to get approval from the Rotary Foundation, and then we have to have district approval, and then you can start spending your money. Then actually this does come up periodically. It tended to come up a little bit more during the pandemic, less so after that. But if you have this really wonderful proposal that you've submitted, but at some point you find out that for some reason this grant is not going to be able to happen as you had intended, we need to know that. We need to hear from you on that. And we need to hear from you before December 1st. So that means you would have gone through the process, you would have been approved by September 1, and subsequently, let's say you find out that your project isn't going to be able to happen. We need to know that again before December 1 and before any expenditures are made in the proposed grant. So yeah, if that happens, we want you to contact us and we'll work you through that process. So a summary of 22-23, just for your reference, and a quick reminder that in 22-23, as Cindy mentioned, we had kind of a test of a 1.5 to 1 match from the district designated funds, and therefore we have a little smaller number of grants funded, but we had 38 district grants funded in 22-23. That came up to a total of 129,750 in district matching funds and 114,170 in club funds. And so that's a pretty remarkable chunk of funding that you all have put to use in your communities. Those total funds represent 44 clubs participating in district grants. 6 of those were international projects, 38 were local projects, and 5 were multi-club projects. Oops, that slide didn't get updated, but that estimate, as we just mentioned in a previous slide, was 127,500 for 23-24. So that slide, yeah, is out of date. So for the coming year, estimate again, 127,500, which is just a couple thousand short of what we had in this current year. And yeah, final amount of district designated funds will be forthcoming from our district stewardship chair when all the finances are figured out with the Rotary Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you,
Kathy?
Kathy. Go
Kathy?
ahead, Hal.
Yeah, I'd like to mention one thing. You know, we're talking about putting lots of receipts and scanning them onto a single page. Don't put too many receipts on a single page because we have to add them all up ourselves. So, you know, please limit that single page to no more than $200 or $300 of receipts. Because if we see $2,000 of scanned pages, it doesn't do us any good to use the expenses tab because we just have to go through and add up all those receipts ourselves. So please keep it to, you know, $200 or $300 per scanned page.
Kathy, I think we've got some questions if you're ready. I'm going to go back. This actually came up when Lynn was presenting, when she was talking about the dates for the project. What if the project is ongoing until we can secure complete outside funding? So I translate that to mean that the district grant portion is just a part of a larger project that will be completed in the future.
Got it. Okay. So yes, absolutely. If you've got an ongoing project, that's fine. And the date that we would ask you to enter would be your estimated date of, you know, the timing by which you expect to complete the district grant portion, if that makes sense. So yeah, if your district grant is going to be for 4,000 and you're buying books, if you can tell us we expect to spend that $4,000 by February, you know, of the next year or whatever that is.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then someone asked a question about how do you delete a grant application that you've started?
You know, that might be a little bit complicated. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Hal.
Yeah, there's if you are on the pencil, there's a place on the pencil and there's a red X and you can delete the grant right there.
Great, thank you.
I don't have the screen in front of me, but.
Right, I would agree with you, Hal. Use the pencil for editing and then there's an X. You should be able to delete the application using that. Question, we've talked about memorandums of understanding or MOUs. The question was, where do I find a template for that?
So that template is on the landing page. So be sure that you change your org year in DACDB to 2324. And the new one, again, huge thanks to Hal. Hal has entered all the critical deadlines and dates, and as well as the documents that you're going to need. So you can just download it from the landing page of 2324 district grants.
Okay, thank you. And just to affirm, someone was asking what the maximum DDF match for this coming Rotary year will be, and it's $2,000. Let's see. I'm looking here because of course everybody's putting their names in now, so the chat box is pretty busy. I think those were all the questions that I saw. I think we can open up the mics here, and if there's any other questions, we can go ahead and take them. Julie, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I had submitted a question. Kathy, could you clarify the process for expediting the payments once everything's been approved? For instance, if you're working with a school district and you want to start being able to expend the money in September, is there a way of letting whoever is reviewing the grants know that so that the payment can be coming in as soon as the grant is approved?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that, Julie. I would say if there is any question that your grant is sitting there and you haven't seen any progress yet, that I think the next slide has our contact information. And I would say that you contact us directly, because with, let's say, 30 to 50 grants sitting in there, we may be just, working our way through them. So I'd say contact one of us directly and just say, hey guys, and I do know this is an issue. There's another club that wants to do a summer project for, let's say, summer lunches for something, and it may be occurring in July. Well, and the key is that we've got to have foundation approval and then our district approval. So long-winded, saying far too many words here. Just contact us and let us know, hey, my goal is to get by September 1 or whatever your date is. And we will work with you on that.
And Julie, this is Heather. I'm the grants treasurer, and I let Kathy and Hal know as soon as I see the Rotary Foundation funding hit the checking account. And that's the point, as they will start lining me up everything that they have approved, and I will kick out checks that next day. And it takes about 5 to 7 business days for the check to arrive because I don't have an actual check account. I have US Bank issues the checks to the Rotary Club address that's listed in DACDB. So if you have a PO box listed, it will go to a PO box. Sorry, Kathy, I thought I meant.
No, thanks, Heather. That's actually very helpful.
Thank you. Marv has a question.
Yeah, when can we put our club funds into the district account for the new calendar year, even though we don't have recognition that the grant's been approved? So since it's in our line budget, I'd like to be able to put the $2,000 in the account in July or August. Is that okay?
I think that's okay, but Hal, do you, I think that's totally fine, but Hal,
Yeah,
go ahead.
that's fine, Marv. Anytime you want to put the money into that account is fine.
Thank you. And we'll note what it's for when we put it in, so it's on the bank statement.
Yes, that's enter your district grants account. You can put the money in that whenever you want to.
Okay, thank you.
Gary Harris, you had a question? You had your hand up? You need to unmute yourself. Well, we'll let him work on that. Does anyone else have any questions? Either put your hand up or type it into the chat box. Let me check there real quick. So another question I think it is good to repeat for our district. The club president is the only one who can submit the grant, or is the club president the one that has to sign the grant?
Right. So that is definitely worth repeating. So anybody can draft the proposal, and it's your president-elect, as we would call them right now. Excuse me, your president-elect for 23-24. After July 1, that's obviously the president for 23-24. And the reason for that is why it's the president-elect is because we want the president for the year in which the project will be carried out to be the one who signs and approves your submission of your proposal.
Kathy, I would add that anybody though can sign the final report and submit the final report.
Yeah, okay, maybe
It's only the proposal that needs to be signed by the president, but the final report for 22-23 can be signed by anyone.
I see. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. And
no, you didn't. He was just adding clarification,
okay.
Which I think is really helpful.
Okay.
Okay, last call for any other questions or comments.
Well, Suzanne Johansson wants to know who can actually submit and write a grant. Who writes the grant?
So that's what we were just referring to. Any club member can be the person to draft the proposal, but it's the club president-elect for 23-24 who has to sign and submit it.
Okay. And just to clarify, this is Cindy. The person who writes the grant is someone who needs to be at this training today or watch the recording and the four-way test, send confirmation to Hal that they've watched this recording. We want the authors to be very knowledgeable about writing and reporting on district grants.